Hi, when starting off as a web developer, it's common to get overwhelmed by the sheer number of programming languages, frameworks, tools, and tech stacks out there. I went through the same when I decided to teach myself how to code. It's easy to get frustrated with all the information and even easier to quit. Figuring out what you need to learn and in what order can feel impossible. I have to start by saying that learning to be a full-stack web developer will not be easy, but your patience, sacrifice, and persistence to push through the difficult parts is what will guarantee you success. I will break down a roadmap for those who are teaching themselves how to code, or any beginner who is starting out from scratch and wants to move past the beginner phase as fast as possible. Phase 1. The fundamentals. So, what do I need to get started? The most important thing is the right growth and learning mindset. This is having the right attitude towards learning that will carry you through the difficulties of programming. The tools you'll need are a web browser and a text or a code editor. For the web browser, I would highly recommend Google Chrome because of its awesome developer tools, but you're free to use other browsers such as Mozilla's Firefox. A text or code editor makes writing and reading source code easier. Just pick one and get started. There are many to choose from, such as Visual Studio Code, Sublime Text, or Atom. I would highly recommend VS Code. The first technology you should learn is HTML. It's a standard tag-based markup language for web pages. It's easy to learn and it's the foundation for the web. You should learn HTML's basic syntax in terms of its structure, the tags, attributes, how to write semantic HTML, and the best practices. This is how a sample web page structured in HTML looks like. Then you move to CSS. It stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It's the language for describing the presentation of web pages, including colors, layout, and fonts. It's the language you should learn right after HTML, but I would recommend learning both HTML and CSS at the same time. With CSS, you should learn its basic syntax, how to make layouts with the box model, CSS grid, and flexbox. Thereafter, move on to responsive design, which is an approach to make web pages render well on a variety of devices and window or screen sizes. This is how to style the previous HTML markup shown before with basic CSS. Once you can build and style basic and static web pages with HTML and CSS, it's time to learn JavaScript, the programming language of the web. JavaScript might not be as easy to learn as compared to HTML and CSS, especially when you are first exposed to it, but it's doable. When starting as a beginner, you need to focus on a particular aspect of JavaScript, because it's literally used everywhere, from backend servers with Node.js to front-end frameworks such as React, Vue, Angular, etc. It's also used in mobile applications, desktop applications, robotics, and machine learning. As a beginner, I would recommend covering these concepts: variables, data types, DOM and DOM manipulation with events and listeners, functions, arrays, objects, and lastly conditional logic and control flow, which includes stuff such as loops, if-else statements, switch statements, and ternary operators. Once you're well versed in these, learn about the key concepts of ES6 plus JavaScript, Ajax, JSON, and APIs, and how to fetch data with JavaScript. Now, with the beginner fundamentals out of the way, it's time to level up. Phase 2. Intermediate skills. Internet basics. Here, you should learn what HTTP and HTTPS protocols are, basics of website hosting, domain names, and web security. If you're interested in web and API security, I already have a video on that on this channel. It will be linked in the card at the end of this video. Version control systems is a system that records changes to a file or set of files over time so that you can recall specific versions later. The most common used version control system for source code is Git. It is mostly used in combination with GitHub, a code hosting platform for version control and collaboration. I would highly recommend the use of GitHub, but you're free to also explore GitLab and Bitbucket. Design. At this point, it will also be useful to learn about web design principles and the use of tools such as Figma and Adobe XD. This will enable you create better designs for websites before translating your design to code with HTML and CSS. I would prefer starting off with Figma. CSS frameworks. Sometimes developers don't feel like designing and coding a website from scratch. Here is where CSS frameworks comes to the rescue, but they are not a must to learn. They speed up design and build time for most websites as they have pre-made components that are easy to customize and adapt to any design. The most common ones are Bootstrap, Materialize, Balmer, and Tailwind CSS. I'll recommend learning Tailwind CSS, but you can't go wrong with either of them. Look through each of the documentation and see what is easier for you to learn and use that. DevTools, especially Chrome DevTools. It gives developers access to the internal workings of the web browser and web apps. Using DevTools, you can know the HTML structure and styles our website uses, the scripts that I used, and also debug and know what errors exist on a page, etc. The command line. There is this fear of the command line when you are first exposed to it. Trust me, it happened to me too. Fear not the command line. It's simply a text interface for your computer. Start off with the basic commands around directory navigation, file manipulation, etc. before moving on to the advanced commands. All web applications use some sort of data storage in the form of a database. Knowledge on relational databases such as Postgres or MySQL is indispensable. I'll recommend learning Postgres. However, you will not go wrong if you choose MySQL. They both use SQL, which is a structured query language. I would also recommend learning at least one non-relational database, also known as NoSQL, such as MongoDB. SSH. Simply put, SSH allows you to log into remote servers anywhere on the globe and carry out remote command execution with the servers. Learning about SSH is crucial when you need to host or publish your website to the public. APIs, also known as Application Programming Interfaces, is a software intermediary that allows two applications to talk to each other. I will recommend starting off by learning about REST APIs and the HTTP verbs associated with it, such as post, get, patch, delete. Once you are familiar with these concepts of REST APIs, it's time to consider backend development. Phase 3. Backend development. Backend development refers to server-side development. It can be done with various languages such as Java, Python, Ruby, Rust, Go, PHP, JavaScript, etc. Start off by properly learning a single language first, which is of interest to you, before picking up another language. I would also recommend learning JavaScript or Python since they are easier to get started off in and are very popular. Backend frameworks also exist to make development easier and less monotonous. The frameworks take all the repetitive tasks in web development and either do it for you or make them very easy to do. If you pick Java, there is Spring, Python has Fast API, Django and Flask, Ruby has Ruby on Rails, PHP has Laravel and Symfony, Node.js has Express, etc. It's often said, in all thy getting, get understanding. That being said, only pick up a backend framework after and only after properly understanding the programming language with which the framework is built upon. Phase 4. Frontend Development. Frontend development is the practice of converting data to a graphical interface through the use of HTML, CSS and JavaScript, so that users can view and interact with that data. Frontend development can be done with vanilla JavaScript, but would highly recommend learning a frontend framework. There are basically 4 major frontend frameworks, that is Angular, Vue.js, React, which is practically a JavaScript library, and Svelte. I would personally recommend learning React.js as it is widely used and really popular right now. You are however free to try out a simple application or read the documentation for the other front-end frameworks and pick the one that resonates better with you. Phase 5. Tech stack. A tech stack is a combination of technologies that a company uses to build and run an application or project. It mostly consists of a server-side and a client-side language plus a database. Popular tech stacks in JavaScript include the Man, Pren, Maven, and Min stacks. I am working on some tutorials on the Man and the Pren stacks, but for the Python track, my tutorials will be on Django and the Fast API powered with a React frontend. Extras, or the stretch learning goals. Testing. Testing is the process of verifying a system with the purpose of identifying any errors, gaps, or missing requirements versus the actual requirement. They are of 3 types: integration, unit, and functional testing. Nest.js. I believe this Node.js framework is worth learning since it's extensible, flexible, versatile, scalable, and progressive. Docker. Docker is an open platform for developing, shipping, and running applications. It uses OS-level virtualization to deliver software in packages called containers. These containers are isolated from one another and bundle their own software, libraries, and configuration files. Continuous integration and continuous delivery (CI/CD) is a method to frequently deliver apps to customers by introducing automation into the stages of app development. The main concepts attributed to CI/CD are continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment. You can either use Travis or Circle CI amongst the many others out there. GraphQL. GraphQL is a query language for your API and gives the client the power to ask for exactly what they need and nothing more, allowing APIs to evolve over time. With all that being said, that's it. Now it's up to you to put in the work, dedication, and time to achieve your dreams of being a full-stack web developer. It's not going to be easy. You will get stuck, but luckily you have the internet at your disposal. It's doable for anyone as long as you have the interest, attitude, patience, persistence, and willingness to push yourself through the difficulty. It's also going to take time, but you will get there. Lastly, learn by doing, which simply means practice, practice, practice. Thanks and cheers.